It's 10 at night. Your phone lights up on the nightstand. You are already exhausted, already winding down in the quiet of your room, but you reach for the screen anyway. A friend is asking for a favor. Again. You feel that familiar, immediate tightness in your chest, a heavy, sinking mixture of dread and obligation. But before you even fully process what they are asking, your fingers are already moving across the keyboard, typing out the words, "Sure, no problem." You hit send, and immediately a quiet, bitter wave of resentment washes over you. You are not just frustrated with them, but deeply frustrated with yourself. You wonder for the 100th time why you cannot simply say no. You wonder why the mere thought of disappointing someone else feels so much more terrifying than the reality of completely exhausting yourself. This is the hidden trap of being the nice guy. It is a label that society constantly praises, but one that secretly, slowly bleeds you dry over time. We often call it people-pleasing, but that term almost sounds too light, too gentle for the kind of psychological weight it actually carries. It is not just about being polite. It is an exhausting, full-time job of managing other people's emotions, constantly anticipating their needs, and relentlessly shrinking your own boundaries until you barely recognize the shape of your own life. Let me tell you about a night that profoundly changed how I understood this dynamic. A few years ago, a friend asked me to help them move, and this was not a small, organized move. It was a chaotic, last-minute, pack-the-boxes-as-we-go kind of move. I had just finished a grueling 50-hour work week. I was running entirely on empty. But they asked, and I was the reliable one. I was the nice one. So I went. I spent hours carrying heavy, awkward furniture up narrow flights of stairs, breathing in dust, staying until 3 in the morning when my hands were literally blistered and my lower back was screaming. I drove home in a daze, completely depleted, silently telling myself that this is simply what good friends do for each other. Then the next morning, I woke up late. I made a cup of coffee, opened my phone, and clicked on their Instagram story. There they were, sitting at a bright, sunny brunch spot with 3 other friends. They were laughing. They were toasting with mimosas. They had not invited me. They were celebrating the move that I had practically carried on my back while I was sitting alone in my kitchen, too physically shattered to even go for a walk outside. In that precise moment, I did not feel like a good friend. I felt like a tool. I felt completely disposable. And the most painful part of that morning was not what they did. The most painful part was the sharp, undeniable realization that I had volunteered for this entirely on my own. I had meticulously built the exact dynamic that was currently crushing me. When you are trapped in this cycle, every single interaction feels like a negotiation where you are the only one making concessions. You find yourself sitting at a restaurant you did not want to go to, paying for food you did not really want to eat, just because you did not want to complicate the group chat. Or you find yourself sitting at your desk at 6 o'clock on a Friday evening, staring blankly at a spreadsheet that isn't even yours, because a coworker let out a heavy sigh, looked overwhelmed, and you instinctively jumped in to save them from their own poor planning. We tell ourselves we do these things because we are generous, because we are empathetic, because we care. But if we are being ruthlessly honest with ourselves, that is rarely the whole truth. Underneath the chronic need to accommodate is a deeply rooted, quiet terror. It is the fear that if we are not actively useful, we will not be loved. We subconsciously believe that our presence alone is not enough, and that we have to actively pay for our seat at the table with favors, with compliance, and with an endless stream of yeses. You become terrified that the very moment you stop being convenient, you will immediately stop being valued. And the absolute tragedy of this behavior is that it does not just stay contained in your personal life. It leaks out into every single room you enter. It colors the way the entire world sees you, and eventually, It permanently alters the way you see yourself. Think about how this pattern plays out in your career. When you are the person who never pushes back, who always takes on the extra load without a single complaint, you think you are building a reputation as a dedicated, indispensable team player. You think your hard work will be rewarded with respect. But the workplace is a strange, unforgiving psychological ecosystem. When you constantly lower your boundaries and do everyone else's heavy lifting, people do not suddenly see you as a leader, they see you as a workhorse. I experienced this firsthand. For a very long time in my own career, I kept my head down. I smiled through the exhaustion. I absorbed the ambient stress of my entire department so others wouldn't have to deal with it. And when a major management position opened up, I didn't even get called in for an interview. When I finally gathered the courage to ask for feedback, I was told, rather casually, that I just didn't have leadership energy. They told me I was fantastic at execution, but they needed someone with more backbone, someone with more vision to lead the team. It felt like a physical slap to the face. I had actively sacrificed my physical and mental well-being for this company, and they were using my very sacrifices as concrete proof that I wasn't strong enough to lead them. This is exactly where a fascinating psychological phenomenon known as the Pygmalion Effect takes hold. The Pygmalion Effect is essentially the psychological weight of a self-fulfilling prophecy. It states that the expectations others have of us directly and measurably influence our behavior and our performance. If a teacher truly believes a student is brilliant, they treat them with slightly more patience, they offer richer feedback, and the student actually rises to that belief and becomes smarter. The positive expectation creates a positive reality, but it works the exact same way in reverse. When the people around you, your friends, your managers, your partners, expect you to just be the quiet, accommodating, agreeable background character, they treat you exactly like one. They talk over you in meetings. They don't pause to ask for your opinion on complex issues. They hand you the grunt work because they safely assume you won't ever push back. And because human beings are highly adaptable creatures, you subconsciously mold yourself to fit their low expectations. You start to think, maybe I am just a follower. Maybe I don't actually have good ideas. Maybe my voice isn't meant to be loud in this room. You shrink your personality to perfectly fit the tiny box they built for you. The expectations of others become the suffocating ceiling of your own potential. If you are hearing this right now and feeling a heavy, familiar knot forming in your stomach, I want you to pause. Take a deep breath. I need you to hear something very clearly, and I need you to let it sink all the way past the shame you might be carrying right now. You are not weak. You are not broken for having operated this way for so long. Being highly accommodating is often a brilliant, necessary survival strategy that you developed a long time ago. Somewhere along the line, perhaps in a chaotic childhood home or in a past relationship that felt deeply unsafe, you learned that being agreeable was the only way to keep the peace. You learned that making yourself incredibly small stopped the yelling, or that being relentlessly helpful was the only reliable way to get any attention or warmth. You did exactly what you needed to do to survive. It was a very smart adaptation, but you are no longer in that environment, and the heavy armor that kept you safe back then is now the very thing that is slowly suffocating you today. So how do we take the armor off? How do we break the Pygmalion loop and stop being the forever nice guy? It starts with the terrifying, beautiful, and necessary practice of saying no. And I do not mean a defensive, loud, or aggressive no. You do not need to suddenly become cold or hostile to establish a firm boundary. In fact, over-explaining yourself, apologizing profusely, or getting angry is often just another subtle way of trying to manage the other person's emotional reaction. The single most powerful way to set a boundary is through a short, neutral sentence, followed immediately by an alternative choice. It is clean, it is kind, and it leaves absolutely no room for debate. The next time someone asks you for a favor that immediately makes your chest tighten, you do not need to write a 3-paragraph apology text explaining how busy you are. You simply say, "I can't help with the move this weekend, but I would be happy to bring you dinner on Tuesday once you are all settled." Or, in a work setting, you say, "I don't have the capacity to take on this project right now, but I can look at it next Thursday." Notice the structure of those sentences. You decline the immediate, draining demand without a shred of guilt, but you still offer a connection or a solution entirely on your own terms. The first time you do this, your heart will probably hammer violently in your chest. You will feel a sudden rush of panic, entirely convinced that they are going to hate you, that you are going to be fired, or that the relationship will immediately end. But I want you to watch what actually happens. Most of the time, the world does not end. The sky does not fall. The person simply says, "Okay, sounds good," and they go ask someone else. And in that tiny, incredibly uneventful exchange, you will feel a profound, sweeping sense of freedom. You will realize that the catastrophic abandonment you feared all these years was just a ghost haunting your mind. As you start saying no to the things that silently drain you, you must also fundamentally change the psychological environment you are swimming in. If you remain surrounded by people who only value you for what you can do for them, you will always be fighting an exhausting uphill battle against their low expectations. You have to actively and intentionally place yourself in rooms where people expect you to be an equal, not a servant. This might mean finding an entirely different circle of friends, or perhaps moving to a different workplace, and explicitly seeking out a mentor who operates on a positive Pygmalion loop. Find someone who looks at you and expects you to speak up. Find a manager who actively asks for your strategic opinion, rather than just silently handing you a mindless to-do list. When you are finally surrounded by people who expect you to be capable, boundaried, and strong, you will naturally begin to rise to that exact expectation. You will start acting like a person whose time is deeply valuable, simply because the environment is finally reflecting that value back to you. Walking away from the nice guy persona is a deeply uncomfortable transition. When you start setting firm boundaries, the people who historically benefited from your lack of them will almost certainly push back. They might call you selfish. They might say you have changed, or that you aren't as fun anymore. Let them. Let them be disappointed. Their temporary disappointment is absolutely not your responsibility to manage. You have spent so much of your precious life trying to be the perfect, frictionless, invisible character in everyone else's story. You have carried their heavy boxes, you have worked their late hours, and you have eaten quietly at their tables, silently hoping that eventually, someday, it would finally be your turn to be taken care of. But no one is coming to hand you your boundaries. You have to claim them with your own 2 hands. You do not have to earn your basic right to exist by bleeding out for other people. You are allowed to take up space in this world simply because you are here. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to be tired. And you are allowed to finally save some of that deep, remarkable, exhausting care for yourself.